Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Frontend Lover. My name is Hemant Dhanore. Today we are going to see about React.js props and reusable component. So in this video we will cover how we can create a props, how we can share the props within the component, and how we can create a reusable component, and how we can share the data between the components. Before starting this video, do not forget to like and subscribe my channel for more videos. So before starting the coding part, we have some prerequisites. So before going to props and reusable component, complete our previous session for React.js setup and how to create a functional component. Below is the link where you can directly access the previous session for the React.js setup. Let's start with the coding part now. Initially, I have created the folder. I have opened my folder from here. Into here, I have created this props folder and I have selected my props folder here. After done that, I have created a React app now name of the props example. And if you see here the packet.json have the props.example. Now let's create a component here. I'll create a component folder here. In the components folder, let's create folder login.js. Okay, inside that let's create functional component. Create a arrow function here. Inside this we need a return. We should have some fragment here. Export default and our component name. Okay, so we have created one functional component here. Now let's create a login form. So how we can create a login form here? Let me add one div with the class name login. Okay, and this close the wrapper. If you see in the React.js, when I have defined the class, normal CSS class, we need to define the class name by using class name keyword. Normally when we create a HTML, we define a class like class login like this. But in the React.js, we are defining the class name by using class name keyword. Reason behind that, this class keyword we are using for defining a class in React.js. So we avoiding that, we have to define a class name here instead of class. So now inside this, we'll have to create input controls. Inside that, we can add a label, the name of user name. Cool. Then we can add input here, type text. I want a placeholder here. The plus placeholder we can add enter your user name. Okay, now we have created one login. Inside login we should have a password form as well. Okay, let's create a password input now. We can enter your password here. We can give the password type so that it cannot access to anyone. Let's copy and paste again. We have to create one button here. In the button, let's have a login button. Okay. So what we have done here, we have created one login form where we have added username, login, username, password and login button. Let's create one S2 tag here. Login page. Now what we need to do, we need to import this login.js in the app.js. So let's go here, remove this logo and import login. Okay, now what we did, we imported login here. Now I want to add a login component here. So how we can do that? We can just replace the complete app.js with the blank fragment. In the blank fragment, we can include our login component here. Okay. Now when we run our application, we will see this login page onto the our front end. Okay, our server is started now. Let's see how the UI will look. Now server executed successfully. Now this is our login form. Let's add some CSS for this one. How we can add? We can add in the app.js as well. Let's remove this. And if you want, you can create a login.css as well and include that into the login.js. Okay, let's add a login and I'll give a max width of 400 pixel. We'll give margin 0 out to make this container align center. Now if you see, our login section is showing in the center. I want to add some CSS for label. I want to pass some min width for label. This is our label. We have to pass display inline block so that it will show like this. Okay, let's reduce some space here. Give this to 80 so that it will be close. Okay, now our UI will look like this. If you want to modify your button, you can modify your button as well in the CSS. Let's modify button, background color. Let's give this color, padding 10 px and 20 px. You will see button like this. Border, I don't want to pass some any border. Give some margin from top so that button should have some space from the top. So this look like our login button. If you want to add some CSS for input control, you can add the input control CSS as well. Let's adding 10 pixel from the all side so that it will look like this. Okay. I don't want the padding from left and right, then I'll pass only top and bottom. Okay, then it will look like this. Okay, so now what we need to do, let's modify the input as well. adding 5 pixel from all the side, it will increase the little bit width. Okay, now what we need to do, I just want to create a reusable component for this input. Now if you see, this input is having two input, okay, and we are adding here two input tag. So instead of adding a two input tag, how we can create a reusable component and how we can use that component here in both the places, and how we can modify our HTML. So let's create one more new component here, input.js. So in the input.js also we can import React, create a functional component one for input, return. Okay. Inside this, let's create one input, text, and we can add placeholder, enter your user name. Okay, now export default. You can pass a component name. Okay, now what we need to do, we just have to call this import this input into the login. Okay, so let's import input component here. So now what we can do, we can import this input component and we can include that here. Okay, now when we see on the browser, it will show the same. We are seeing enter your username. But now I just want to reuse this component in the password as well. How we can reuse? Okay, let's copy this from here and we can paste here. Now if I add the include the input component in the both username and password, it will show same type and the same placeholder for the both. Okay, so then how we can manage this one? Okay, now if you see, we are seeing both username placeholder, and if we are entering anything here, it is showing a text. The type is not password. So how we can modify this? So for modifying this, we need to pass the props from here. So that we are going to teach in this session exactly. So for props, we need to pass the props from here. Let's say I am passing a props like type. I want text. I want placeholder. Enter your username. Similar to this, here as well, we need to pass type, and we can pass a different type, and we can pass a placeholder here. Enter your password. Okay. Now we have passed these props from here, but how we can get those in the input.js? So get those props here. We can get the props like this one, and let's see, and we can console the props here. Console.log. We can console the props. So let's go to browser and see what we are getting into the console. If you see in the console, we are getting two-time console, because reason is our component is rendering two times. One is username, one is password. So if you see first, you are getting enter your username and the type is text, and for second one we are getting enter your password and type is password. We are getting this in the props. So whenever you want to use, we can pass these props like here, type, we can give a curly brace here. So for defining any props, state or variables, we need to pass a curly brace here, and we can pass a props dot type here. Okay. Similar to this one, we need to update this to curly brace, then props dot placeholder. Okay. Now what we did, whatever value we passed from these props, we just get that in the input.js in the props, and we have update those value into the input type and the placeholder. So let's go to browser and see. Now if you see in the input, we are getting input your username, and here we are getting enter your password. Okay, refresh the page again. Here also we are getting type text and type password. Both we are getting here. Now how we can destruct these props here? Okay, let's say I just want to destruct these props here. So what we can do, we can pass curly brace here only, and we can get the props here. Like first props we going to get type, then we can get a placeholder. Okay, we can get define like this, or we can define like this as well. Okay, but if you have multiple props here, then you can just break those into this new line. Okay, we can just destruct that into the from the object. Now if you see, we are getting one error, props is not defined, because we have removed the props and we are directly destructing this type and placeholder from the props. So now we need to remove these props from here, and we can directly access this type and placeholder what we are passing from here. Now let's go to browser and see what output we are getting. Similar, we are getting username and password. Now let's pass some values from here. I want to pass some value, default value. Let's say I'm passing default value Hemant, and here default value I'm passing blank. Okay, I don't want to pass any value now. Okay, for password. Okay, so we can get the value here, and we can pass default value here. Okay, now if we go to browser, we will see default value in the input is Hemant, and second as we have a blank. We don't have any value, then it is showing a placeholder. Here we are getting one error. A component is changing an uncontrolled input to be controlled. This is likely caused by the value changing from the undefined to a defined value. Okay. So what we can do, we will see this in the next lecture. What is uncontrolled and the control input, and how we can modify the uncontrolled and the control components. Okay. So this error we will cover in the next video. Now, how we can access the with the props keyword, we can directly update the props here, and we can pass the props dot type similar to props dot placeholder and props dot value. This is the similar way that we previously did. Now even we can do that. We can modify the values as well. So why we need this? Okay, because we are passing the three values from here. Okay, and we are having three values here as well, right? We can keep those values input directly here as well, but some of time we need to do some operation on the inputs. Like I want to do some on change events, I want to do some on focus. So we can write all of the events into this input component, and we can use that events in the shareable component, like the component we have defined here, we can reuse that methods here in the different places. So once we get the props, so we are getting the props here. After getting the props, we can destruct these props here as well. Let's say I'm destructing these props here. I'm defining one constant variable, and in that we can pass the object and we can assign the props here. Okay, similar, we destruct those here. We can destruct here as well. Type, comma, placeholder, comma, values. I'm destructing those value here. Then we can pass those value here. So we can do this by this way as well. We can get the props, then we can destruct, or we can destruct this directly here as well, and we can reuse that as well. So this is the way that we can pass the props, create the props, pass the props, and we can utilize the props. So now this input component we have created once, but you can use this input component multiple places. So in the next lecture, we will go into deep into the how we can create a constant, what type of variable we can create in the React, how we can define an event, how we can access the methods, and how we can share the methods within the different components that we can see in the next lecture. Hope you like this video. If you like, do not forget to subscribe this video